Okay, yesterday we started learning the dinim of getting married, those different things, the obligation of plurivu, of being fruitful and multiply, and when you get the mitzvah plurivu, not only when you have children, when you have grandchildren that are male and female, okay, so on and so forth. Okay, now in halacha it says like this, it's not done today, the Rama says it's not done today for various reasons. But what happens if somebody married a woman and he's married 10 years and they don't have children? So in halacha it says you divorce her and marry somebody else. Lepera, the Rama himself writes that that's not done today. There are various ideas what to do, but there was also a difference in the olden times, or before the Rabbeinu Gershon, or still in the Sephardic communities, where you can have more than one wife. Not nowadays, but years ago, before the legal law said polygamy is forbidden. So then they were able to marry, like in this week's Parsha, Avram and Hagar, right? So she couldn't give birth, so Avram married Hagar. That's the source of the din, by the way, because it says Avram was married, lived with Sarah 10 years, they didn't have kids, and Sarah said, okay, go marry Hagar and have kids. The bill's not done today, and Moshe, technically what happens is somebody who did not fulfill the mitzvah approval, didn't have children yet. But he dafka wants to marry a woman that can't have children. She can't have children, so the question is, do you forbid him to marry her because he can't have two wives and he has the mitzvah approval? So it says in halacha, you don't forbid him, you advise him to try to, if he didn't do the mitzvah approval, to try to marry a woman that would be able to bear children. But again, it's not even forbidden in those cases to do that. We learned also that a woman is not obligated the mitzvah approval, but nevertheless, this we didn't mention yesterday, but Poskim write that because the mitzvah of being fruitful, multiply, basically having children, cannot be done without the woman, well, not yet. So then she also gets part of the mitzvah, even though she's not commanded in the mitzvah, but she still gets a part of it. But there's an interesting thing. The pasuk says, "Plurivu milos haaretz." Okay, be fruitful, multiply, and conquer the land. But there's also another pasuk in Tanakh that says, "Leila tehu bra elo l'shavas yitzara." The world was not created. The world was not created to be empty, to emptiness. The Shavas Yitzhar was created to be civilized. And Poskim write, in that aspect, the woman is mechuyev, because that's not a positive mitzvah. In other words, the positive mitzvah approval, we learned yesterday, the woman is not obligated in, because it says v'chiv shua, to conquer the land. Women don't go to battle, according to Torah. But the aspect of Leila Teobra Shavis according to many poskim, a woman is obligated on that aspect of it.
What's the reason we only caution the person not to marry someone that's married and not stay outright that they should?
Because halachically they could. Shulchan says halachically you could marry somebody that can't have children. But it's advised people, unless if the guy already has children from before. So a guy had children from before in the second marriage, they're both older, whatever. He's not mechuyev, if he's 80, he's not going to mechuyev to marry a 25-year-old who's going to have more kids. But, they advise, what?
A woman who doesn't have children could marry a man who can't have children.
Correct.
Because she doesn't have children.
Correct. Unless the chiv of letel b'ro shavis. Yeah, but technically a woman who cannot have children is allowed to marry somebody who is not able to have children. I'll tell you another interesting case. We were discussing about mamzer, well, a little bit. But if a mamzer marries a kosher woman, so to speak, the kid's a mamzer, right? Now, a mamzer is allowed to marry a woman who converted, a giyeris, okay? But you don't advise it because their children are going to be mamzerim. And all you're doing is multiplying mamzerim.
How does a mamzer have kosher children, so to speak?
The Gemara says in Kedushin, if you're learning Daf HaYomi, Rabbi Shimon Levi says, Kesed Mitar Mamzerim. It's a whole issue. But technically, there's nothing you could do. We discussed this yesterday. 1 second. But what happens if there's a mamzer that can't have children for whatever reason? And there's a woman who converted who can't have children either. Okay? So then you're not afraid, and he's allowed, again, a mamzer could marry a convert, a halachic convert. He's allowed to marry her. You don't advise it because if they have kids, the kids are mamzerim. But what happens if the woman can't have kids for whatever reason? Medically, she can't have kids. So technically, a mamzer could marry that woman. Then they're not going to have kids. If they're going to have kids, you tell them they can't because all you're doing is multiplying mamzerim, which is bad enough as it is.
Just multiply forever.
Huh?
Mamzer never stop.
Says Hashem cried, the Gemara says Hashem cries every day on a mamzer. What should he do? But you see, the power of what people do, how it affects all generations, future generations. That act, what they're doing, something illegitimate, is causing this kid, for all generations, to suffer from it. Okay, and now, it says in Halacha, the Gemara says, a person should try to marry a woman from a proper family. Now, what's the definition of a proper family? So number one, the Gemara says that the families don't fight with everybody. A family that fights with everybody, it says, stay away from. Because it's in the blood, so to speak. But it says, like in Kitzur brings down, the Gemara says, Jews are baishanim, they're like have shame, they're rachmanim, they're kind people, they gem nechsadim, do kindness. That's called a proper family. That and may I add, from a stable home. That also helps out a lot. But in Halacha, it says people that fight. The Gemara says families that fight with everybody, stay away from them. Then there's other issues with the medical issues. You know, that Halacha says sometimes you should try to stay away from a family that has a genetic illness that might be transmitted, and that. But that's complicated issues. People have to speak, you know, with the Rav that knows this stuff and kappen to the Rav and deals with these issues. Okay, now, what happens if, so now the question is like this. Somebody comes and says they're Jewish. Okay, go out in the shidduch, the family says they're Jewish. You don't know them. You don't know the family, you know. So what's with them if somebody comes and says they're Jewish? You believe them, you don't believe them. What's the halacha about that? Says the machlekes in halacha, some people hold that every family has a chazakah. They say they're Jewish, there's a chazakah that they're Jewish. In other places, other poskim say this, that, by the way, you don't have to say they're arguing. Other places say, we don't know. If you don't know them, how do you know they're Jewish? You know, just because, especially coming from a distant land, you don't know anybody about them. Especially today, this was one of the biggest problems when the Russians started coming into Israel. You know, after the Gorbachev took off this, and people were coming into Eretz Yisrael. One of the biggest problems that Rabbonim in Israel had at that time, to figure out who in the Russians is Jewish and who's not Jewish. Because they would say they're Jewish just to get out and go to Israel or whatever. It was a very, very difficult way. And there are Bais Din today, by the way, that check out based on whatever research they do to find out if somebody's actually Jewish. Now, if you know the family, they're living generations as Jews, yeah, halachically they're Jewish. That's what you assume. If not, how do you know anybody's Jewish? But a person that comes and you don't know anything, and you know, so you really halachically you have to check into what.
What about a family that is not Jewish anymore, but you know them to be Jewish?
What do you mean they're not Jewish anymore? Such a thing does not exist.
They converted to Baha'i.
Baha'i, this, that, Jens. Bottom line is, once a Jew, always a Jew. So they might say they're not Jewish, but halachically, a Jew who converts to another religion, halachically, is 100% Jewish.
Even after many, many generations. I mean, a lot of people.
If it's mother, daughter, you know, if it's the mother lineage, huh?
Only the same family.
I mean,
No, well, one second. What's the daughters? One second. There's a shaila, how many generations back do you have to look into this? But the only difference is like this. A Jew became converted to another religion, even though halachically they're 100% Jewish. But if they want to come back to the fold, so to speak, to come Bali Tshuva, they have to go through what's called Geiros Mid Rabbonim. It's called a rabbinic conversion. Rabbinically, they have to go through Geiros. It's the last halacha in Hilchos Geidim. The halacha over there says that they have to go through, what is a rabbinic conversion? Obviously, if he's Jewish, he's circumcised. You don't have to do a bris again. Or if it's a woman. So the din is, they have to go to a mikvah in front of a Bais Din, in front of 3 rabbis, and they have to have to do Kabbalah's mitzvahs again. Then you can count it back for a minyan, then you can, all the things as a what?
It's in front of 3 rabbis. How do you deal with this issue? They stand outside of the mikveh?
If it's a man tabling or a woman?
You said a woman.
It's a man or woman. How does any woman convert today?
So basically,
It's done in a way that the men...
And they have a female shliach inside?
The female attendant inside, the Rabbanim stand off by the side, you just see the head go under. No, it's done properly. What?
As a Rav, if 2 non-frum couples, if a couple comes that are not frum, and they want to get married, how much do you check? How do you check?
You have to check. Just having a form, fill out a form, are you Jewish? Yes, is not going to work because everybody, I won't say they lie, they stretch the truth. They say, well, if they're Arab, Muslim, well, it's still Jewish from Avram Avinu, and if you're Christian, you're from Yoshka, who was a Jew, so, they stretch it. But bottom line, if it's a not from couple, there's what's called Bir Yadus. They're Bati Dinim today that do what's called Bir Yadus. They check to make sure somebody's Jewish.
Even if it's notarized?
Even if it's notarized. All notarized means that the 2 witnesses lied also. Huh? Even if you notarize by 2, it's still 2 liars. So it's 1 liar. No, they have to, there's a, Rabbanim listen, the Shluchim have this constantly. Now from people, they have to do what's called Bir Yadus. If they find out, they take a look at the grandparents' ksuba, for instance, or who did the grandparents' wedding. If they found out it was a competent Rav, then they can assume that side of the family is Jewish. Because if not, then you can assume that they're Jewish. There's a lot of ways of going about it, and they do verifications and to the best of one's ability.
So, former Soviet Union was probably very challenging because there were no records of any of these things.
Former Soviet Union was very challenging, and the Russians that come from Russia to America and to Eretz Yisrael, again, one of the biggest problems with the Russian Jewry is who is a Jew, who's not a Jew.
So how do they find out?
They have the ways of checking into it. By the way, just checking the city records, go back to the city you came from and you go into the city records and you check, and over there it says Jid or whatever, that they're Jewish, doesn't necessarily mean, that means that the person said, I'm Jewish. It doesn't mean they're Jewish. How do you know they're Jewish? Maybe they're not.
I can agree with that.
Huh?
Wasn't bad.
Bad at what?
The Yid over there, in terms of the way persecuted.
Not necessarily. If they wanted to get out, what?
About the Africans. They can't use
Yeah, the Ethiopians, you mean? That was also a very big controversial issue. Are they Jewish? Are they not Jewish? Rabbi Yosef Feinstein then ruled. I know the Rabbanut in Israel ruled that they're Jewish. Rabbi Yosef Feinstein has a lot of tshuvas about this, and he ruled in his time that they should go through a doubtful conversion, which were they very upset about, but really they didn't understand it was for their benefit. Because if you're assuming they're Jewish, then you have a questions of are they mamzerim or not? Because these people weren't part of mainstream Judaism in the era of the Gemara, where they had all the laws of get and kedushin and marriage and all these things. So the question, what they did then, who said it was kosher? So it was a big shilas of mamzeris by those people. And Moshe Feinstein ruled they didn't understand, they were angry at him. It was a big scandal. I remember when, I'm older than I remember all those things happening. And it was for their benefit. He said, there's not a shalom mamzeris, they have to convert. So if they want to be Jewish, let them convert according to halacha and be religious, and then they'll, won't be a shalom mamzeris.
What was the Rebbe?
The Rebbe didn't mix in. What? Permanent. Till Mashiach comes.
The Rebbe didn't have an opinion on it?
I'm sure he did, but the Rebbe didn't mix into halachic issues, generally speaking. Machat shin z'mayim z'mayim machat v'mayim. Given shivalad al teir v'chon gashem rasel b'chon zak sofi g'cheb.